Hey my dolls, and welcome back to my channel. So today I'm actually going to be doing something a little bit different than what I normally do. I know that I had mentioned that I was going to possibly do a tutorial for you, and today is going to be my whack at a tutorial. So this isn't a fancy tutorial of any kind, but I do want to show you guys how a simple girl like me can make a very cute, very easy, very cheap farmhouse style sign for my kitchen. I know that you guys see those all over Etsy and all over Pinterest, everywhere, and they're super expensive depending on who's selling them, the size of them, and honestly, you can do it yourself for only a couple of dollars, and that will save you 40 to 50 bucks depending on the size of your sign. So I hope I can help somebody today with the tutorial, and let's get started and show you what you'll need. So you'll want to start out with a clean work surface. As you can see, I opt to do my crafting in my shed, which can be a pretty dirty place. And even though I've already swept everything out, there's still dust everywhere. And so I have laid down a cheap tablecloth from Party Store or Walmart. They're usually about $1 for one or two, depending on where you go. This will make sure that, for one, paint doesn't stick, doesn't get stuck to the wood or whatever surface that you have below. And you can clean it off very nicely, and it does help with the dust problem. You will also need a set of brushes. I choose for a larger brush to paint the background of my wood, and these smaller brushes are for detailing, which will be used to do the outline. Although I don't use all of these brushes, I like to have a nice variety. So if you choose the finer tip one, that'll definitely help with the detail. I do not have a wax brush. However, I have this old brush that has old dried primer on it, and the bristles here are clean, but it's such an old brush that it's not going to hurt me any to waste it on a wax brush. If you do have the money for a wax brush, I highly suggest it, because I will be using Minwax Paste Finishing Wax in Special Dark, along with my Waverly Chalk Plaster Paint. This is one of my favorite chalk paints. It is a nice matte color. It's pretty bright white, but once we add the Special Dark wax to it, it will darken it up a bit. And then I also choose to go over it all in the very end with the Waverly Clear Wax. This is my favorite brand. It's my favorite wax to use. It's not greasy, it dries quickly, and doesn't leave any film. You will also need your choice of wood. You can see here that I have chosen to go with some small slats that I actually purchased for $1 each, these big ones, from a lovely lady that I met on Facebook. This was actually free, that I found in the junk pile on our bulk trash day, which is for a smaller sign that I'll be doing on a different day. But I think that I'm going to choose this larger piece here. And these, like I said, these were only $1 each. And they are pieces of pallet. So you can also get your own pallet boards from just a standard size pallet if you choose. I didn't want to deal with the nails and breaking it down and all of that, so I chose to just go purchase some already broken down pieces. But for all of these here, I actually bought 5. I've already made one sign. It was only $5, so super, super cheap. I can make 5 signs, and it'd still be way cheaper than buying one. So unless you're super good at calligraphy, freehand, like I'm not, then you will not need stencils. But for me, I do need stencils. I have chosen the cheap route of printing out my stencils on plain paper. You're also going to need some pencils and some tape, a hammer, and some hooks. I choose the sawtooth hangers for my signs because they are just the easiest, cheapest, and they hold up the best. Some clean, reusable rags, and also some throwaway rags. And you will also need a sander or sandpaper. As you can see, I was a little rough on this one and ate off a piece. So I will need to replace this before I sand down my piece of wood. Even though the wood's nice and porous and I can take the paint very well, I still like to smooth that out a bit just to avoid splintering or anything like that. If you don't have a sander, no big deal. Just grab a piece of sandpaper, everyday sandpaper, and just sand it. It'll take you a little bit longer, a little bit more work, but same result in the end. So, first step, of course, is going to to be to sand the wood down. So I am just going to give it a light sanding all the way through. This particular piece of wood that I've chosen does have a nice knot taken out of it, but I do like that rustic feel. So even though it's going to impact the design, you want to be careful if you do have pieces like this that you sand carefully through here, not to chip away any more of the wood. But I do, again, like the way that that looks. Also on this side, I'm going to sand over that carefully as well, just to make sure I don't chip those pieces off. So now that I am done sanding, I do want to show you guys the back side of this piece of wood. As I mentioned before, it's a little rough. So I've decided this is in fact going to be the back, just because of all the cracks in it. When I bought it, I noticed all these cracks. It's not like I didn't notice these. But I liked this indentation here. I liked how it looked beat up, old, rustic. That's just the style that I was going for. But the back side, this could cause some issues if we're using it for the front. Just because of all the cracking, when you're trying to stencil, it'd be a little bit harder work. So I suggest using your smoothest side that you have. And then generally what I do before I get ready to paint, the reason why I asked to get the reusable rags is to dust it off. I don't use any cleaner or anything, of course, because the wood is porous and it could absorb and get really gross and affect your paint and all kinds of things. So we are just going to dust it off. And even though I'm not painting the back side of the wood, I still sand it down just to get whatever gunk was on it off. So that's step one. And now we're going to paint. So your next step is to pick a paint that you would like as your base coat or your backgrounds or the main color of your sign. I have chosen again this plaster, which is an off-white color, Waverly's plaster chalk paint. Very nice. I just like the way, again, it goes on very smoothly. Just get a brush that would be fairly decent, easy size for you to paint your piece of wood. And I just start applying the paint. It's pretty warm here right now in Arizona for January. It's kind of almost irritating. It's about 88 degrees, so this paint should not take too long to dry. I usually just honestly pour some onto my brush like this. This paint does get pretty thick when it's been opened. I just opened this and used it on another sign once. It was open for a couple of hours, you know, and just the way that this paint is. So anyway, it gets very thick, so it's not like it'll spill out everywhere. But I just start applying a nice coat. If you plan on making it a rustic sign, which is the intention of these types of signs, or you plan on distressing it by sanding it down, or in my case, using Minwax as a finishing paste to give it that antique-y look, then you don't really have to be too worried about getting every single crack or detail of the sign, although I do like to make sure that the sides are fully painted. But if there's like little strips or little holes, like I'm not sure if you can see in here, like this, where you miss this area in here, that's fine. The Minwax is going to fill those holes and darken it up anyway. And besides, you're also going to be adding a stencil over the top, which is a distraction. But farmhouse, vintagey, rustic, cottage, all that type of look is very, very in right now. I have always really liked vintage items anyway. There's just something about it that's beautiful and unique and very special. So, and what's great about it too is it looks like it is expensive and classy without being expensive. And the fact of the matter is, it's really not classy at all. I'm painting in my shed. So for all you girls that are like me, that like to have nice things, that are on a budget, this is for you, girl. Also, I just realized when I went in to wash my paintbrush that I failed to tell you that you do need another color, whatever you choose, for the lettering. I guess I just assumed that you'd figure it was gray because of the printout, but I choose just a simple apple barrel paint in pewter gray that I will be using for the lettering. You can either sponge it on, or I prefer to paint it in detail, which does take longer with these little brushes here, but just what I prefer. So now I'll show you how to make a super cheap and easy stencil. And all you're gonna need is a printer and a little bit of ink, some scissors, and some tape. So basically what my sign is going to say is fresh produce. So as you see, the way that it's cut out on these papers, it's a little too spaced. So that's why you'll need the scissors and tape to put it together nicely so that it will fit across the board in a good fashion, because you don't want the R and the E to have a huge gap and the S and the H to have a huge gap. So you just want to cut the excess off of the E. So I will generally fold the paper down to where I think it would be good. You don't even really need the scissors. If you don't want to cut, you don't have to, but you can just fold it over and tape, but I would suggest it because the way that we're transferring is old school, like 2nd grade, where you're going to be coloring the back of the paper with the pencil and then tracing over the top to transfer it onto the paint. I know you guys know what I'm talking about. So generally, you guys can make your sign say anything that you want. You can make it say farmhouse, farmer's market, groceries was another one that I thought about doing, antiques, vintage. You can make it say whatever you want. You can also pick whatever font that you want, which is really great when you're using WordPad or Word or whatever document processor that you're using on your computer. You can pick whatever font you want. But I already have a farmer's market sign, and I already have a farmhouse sign, and I actually paid someone for those, which gave me the idea of figuring out a cheap and easy way to do this myself. And although the lady was awesome, and she only charged me 15 to 20 bucks a piece for those signs, I was still like, you know what, I can do that. I can do that myself. So here's my first stencil. Fresh. Voila. Fresh is looking pretty fresh. So I have pieced together the last half of the sign. I ended up just cutting a small piece off the front of each one of the papers and taping it to the second sheet. And then when I turned it over, I sliced off the big part on the back so that I'm able to go over with a pencil and just give it a nice coating so that I'm able to turn it over and easily transfer it. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I don't want to assume that everyone does know that method. I will show you how easy it is. Let me show you how to do the easy transfer. If you don't have transfer paper, which I do, but it wasn't big enough, just too much work, I'm just going to flip this over from where this is, and I'm going to just lightly put a coat of pencil over where the picture will be. You can hold it up to the light if you need to make sure that you're getting the entire letter covered. Just get all of the area coated like this. And the idea is, once you flip it over like this and you trace over the top, that pencil is going to transfer onto the wood and give you a nice outline to then go over and trace with your paintbrush. Can't get much cheaper and easier than that. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish that now and check in with you when it's time to transfer. so now that I am done with the backing of the stencil, I have now laid it down onto my board, fitting exactly where I would like it to be. I did space out from the end here a little bit here. I didn't actually get a measuring tape and measure it. I usually just eyeball everything. You guys are more than welcome to get out your fancy devices and measure, but I just don't. It's just not how I operate. So I've also, as you can see, taped the stencil on here so that it just doesn't move around. And now I'm going to go over it with a pencil to transfer that lead from the back side of the paper onto my wood. Also failed to mention that you may want a pencil sharpener. Right, so now you'll see that I went over and traced all the letters, and hopefully the end result will be favorable. When we take off this tape, it'll give us a nice transfer of the letters onto the wood. Voila! So looks pretty straight to me. Looks pretty good. So now I'm going to go over and paint with my gray very carefully. And honestly, you don't even have to be that careful, because if you do like that vintage farmhouse look, which again is what we're going for, then unless you're an absolute perfectionist, you don't have to be extremely diligent, because if you're going to be sanding it a little bit down after you've put the paint on, it's going to rough up the edges anyway, especially if you're going to put some Minwax finishing paste. It's going to give it that antique look. So I'll show you how I complete this, but you're more than welcome to do it any way that you like. This is a tedious process though, so it is going to take some time. I will speed up the video for you guys to spare you all of the details, but I at least want to show you how it's done my way. First letter is done. As you can see, it's not absolutely perfect. The lines aren't exactly perfect, but they are fair enough to be able to read legibly. So I'm going to go over just like that. A larger brush used to fill, and the smaller detail brush similar to this will be used to go over the outline. It's going to take me quite a while to do this, so I'm not going to film the entire thing, but I will check back in with you once it is done. So here is the final product of the stencil work. I have filled in all of the letters with my chosen paint color, which again was the Pewter Gray by Apple Barrel. And you can see that the lines aren't perfect, but they are legible and they do look fairly decent. I think I did a pretty good job on that. The daylight has escaped me, so now I'm just working with my lamp. I will let this go ahead and finish drying. I'm sure the fresh is dry by now, but the produce may still be a little damp. So I'm going to go and make dinner, and then I will come back out and check on it. So now it's time to finish this bad boy up. So it looks pretty dry to me. Looks really good. So the next step in the process will be to apply the mid-wax paste finishing wax, which is a protectant, a polisher. It's for furniture trim paneling, also used in primary antiquing of a lot of farmhouse and distressed signs, furniture. That is what I'm going to do next, and I will show you how to do that. Again, I do not have a wax brush, which you really don't need. They are a lot better, I will give you that much, but I'm just going to use this general brush here, and I will end up loading it up and rubbing it into the cracks. And when I do that, I'm going to let it sit for just about a minute or so, and then I'll be wiping it off with a disposable cloth. So for any of you that have never used Minwax before, it's very, very smelly, very potent, and very greasy, but it does work like a charm when you are trying to distress items and give it that special antique look. If you have a highly ventilated area, I really suggest using that, like shed, perfect for outside. I did use this indoors earlier this week when I was distressing a mirror that I got at Goodwill, and it stunk up my whole house. So I ended up opening up all the windows and doors, and it aired it out within a couple of hours, but really don't suggest that. So basically I'm going to show you how to use this. You can see I have it laid out here, my sign all ready to go. Basically, if you have a wax brush, perfect. If not, again, use one of these. You're just going to put the brush in and wiggle it around until you get a nice goopy mess on the end of your brush. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your brush and you're just going to start rubbing it in like this. Just start rubbing it into the cracks. You can load your brush up some more and just start loading it in there. It's really good if you get a lot of chunks and you really put it in those cracks, and that'll really let the antique look set in. Give it a nice, highly distressed antique look without having to sand. I chose to leave the solid print rather than sand because I didn't want it to look as distressed since I'm already antiquing. Sorry about the camera there, trying to do two things at once. But that was my choice. If you guys want a more distressed look, you are more than welcome to go in with sandpaper and scratch it up a bit. But for now, it gives you the basic idea. Just dig some goop, rub it in. So that I can give you guys an example of exactly what it's going to look like, I will show you the partial sign. I'm not going to do the whole thing because if you leave it there to sit for an extended period of time, it's really going to darken up that paint. And I don't want it much darker than it already is. So what you're going to do, you're going to take your disposable cloth now, your lint-free clean disposable cloth. So I chose a t-shirt that I cut up, and you're just going to start wiping the Minwax away. So just start wiping it off. And when you do that, the only thing that should reside is in the cracks. That's the primary idea, is just to leave it in the cracks. Sorry about the camera angles, guys. I want to be able to show you the emotion, and my iPhone's not the greatest. So you can see here, you'll start to see that the only thing that's left really is in these cracks here. So it gives it that nice antique-y, rustic feel. I'm going to go ahead and finish this end here. I might even do a second pass depending on if I want that a little bit darker in those grooves. But hopefully you guys can see how I do this. good. Let me show you the result here. You can see how the Minwax settles in those crevices, and it really gives it that vintage antique feel. I'm really sort of in love with this. It's going to need to dry for at least 20 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and clean up most of the trash around here, and I will be back out to put the final coat of wax. All right, you beautiful souls, we are on the second to last step of this glorious vintage project, and we are going to be using Waverly Inspirations clear water-based wax that seals and protects. It's also non-toxic. Yum. So this will help not only seal and protect the entire project, it will also help the Minwax stay in place, which is very important. And I've given this 20 minutes to dry, so we're just gonna mix this up a little bit. I don't shake it, but I do try to swirl it. They don't say anything about swirling. That is a thing. We're swirling. This is very runny stuff. So I'm gonna take another rag, and what you're gonna do is you're not just gonna like wipe it all over and then wipe it off. You're actually going to be massaging the wax here. You'll be massaging it into the wood. So you can see, let me bring you over here. Going to apply it and then just start rubbing it in. Give it a little massage. Like so. And you don't have to use it sparingly or anything, but you also don't want it gunked up. So when you're getting it onto your rag, get, you know, an okay amount, but not crazy. And then you just slowly will rub it to seal and protect in those cracks. Also, I do want to mention I have used this wax on a lot of white projects, and it does, if you let it gunk up in some areas, you'll have a yellow color. So just be careful with that, or be mindful with that. And that's all you really need, a good little coat. And I'm going to do that to this entire project here. And then I will also need this to dry for about 20 minutes or so. It's not really too crazy. You just want to make sure that it's dry, because the last thing you want is to come touch a tacky project and then either it smudges or gets all over you or gets on something else like other furniture. We also are going to be putting the hooks on the back once this is done, because my sole intention is to get this hung up by tonight. So now that the wax is completely dried, I have folded over my plastic workspace, dusted it off, and made sure it was clean. And now I'm going to add my sawtooth hangers. So I picked these up at Home Depot. There was 3 in a pack, but I've already used one of them. So I'm going to use the last 2 here to put on either side of the board. One here and one here. I've made the mistake, believe it or not, before of putting one in the middle, and you've got like this going on. To avoid that, you're going to want to put one on each side. But anyways, I picked these up at Home Depot for probably like $2, like $1.98, and that's super cheap to do it yourself. Now, all you're going to need is your sawtooth hangers. It comes with teeny tiny nails and a hammer, and very simple, you just line them up, hammer them in, and you're done. So when you take these out of the package, you'll see that it comes with these teeny tiny little nails. They do give you an extra nail. I don't know why, just one extra. It's like people only lose one of the nails. And then they give you these little sawtooth hooks. These are always my go-to hangers. This might be hard for you to see. These are always my go-tos because they are the cheapest and they seem to hold the best. So as I mentioned before, you'll just be putting them here on the board, just somewhere, not right at the edge. You don't want to do that. Also, you don't want to put it like down here or or way up close to the top, but you're going to want to put it maybe about an inch down, probably about 4 inches off to the side on either side of the board. And like I said, I eyeball everything. If you guys don't feel comfortable in doing that, you can get, you know, a measuring tape or a ruler. So anyways, you're gonna take your little nail, teeny tiny little nail. I'm sorry you guys, I wish you could see this a lot better. And your hammer, and you're just gonna line it up to the little holes that they have on the side. This is so simple, you probably don't need a demonstration, but I'm giving you one anyway. And you'll be hammering it through there. So, anyway, enough chitter chatter. Let's do it. So this is the final product, my fresh produce sign. It is so perfectly antiqued and distressed. I'm in love with it. I'm in absolute love with it. It just looks perfect up there. It matches so well with my other signs. It's such a big sign. I mean, you can see how large my window is there, and it takes up almost the entire length of that curtain. So like I mentioned before, let me know what you think. Let me know if you've tried this method, if you end up trying this method. So that project is complete. I'm out here in the shed getting ready to clean up. Please again, like, subscribe. Let me know of any other types of tutorials or crafts you'd like to see me do. I'd be happy to at least take a whack at it if I've never done it before. I hope that you do try this or even make a smaller scale size sign with the same method. I really like sharing my talents with all of you, and I really hope to see some of your creations too. If you have any tips, also leave those in the comments below. And until next time, love ya.